all you need to know. KNX 1070 News Radio.
Good morning. The time is 4:30 on Monday, January 17th, and these are the places where there's news. Washington, the nation...
It was going to be a beautiful day that early morning in Los Angeles in 1994. It was a holiday, the end of a 3-day weekend. Most of the city was asleep, taking it easy. The Earth was awake, however, and on the move.
The White House, President Clinton...
It's an earthquake. We're having an earthquake. Relax. Just stay right here. We're having an earthquake. Relax.
911. What is going on? Earthquake.
Okay, and this is Jay Lawrence with radio station KFI. Ladies and gentlemen, if you just... what I can say is we've just experienced a real whopper here, especially here at the radio station. We're trying to piece everything together. What I can say is Los Angeles apparently just had a major trembler.
So major that it has made the citizens and scientists worry about it ever since, if and when it might happen again. But at the time, there were more pressing and immediate problems.
Don't bend your legs.
Fire and paramedics. I can't see anything. Listen to me. Calm down. Okay, calm down because the fire department will come out, okay? Hold on a second.
It's an earthquake and I'm in my house. Everything is falling apart. I have the doors. I don't know what to do.
Ma'am, just stay calm.
I need the fire department in my apartment. The water's coming out to the back room. Some pipes came loose or something and hot water's
Okay, sir, the fire department does not handle that. You'll have to go out and turn the water off at the main.
The shock waves broke gas lines, igniting a series of fires. Water pipes ruptured, making water and flames bizarre neighbors. The water lay on the ground, reducing the pressure for the firemen's hoses. People sought shelter where there was none.
All units be advised, we have sustained a major earthquake in the LA basin. All unit battalions report on Blue 4.
In darkness, rescue workers tried to find people unable to help themselves. First impressions were that the earthquake was confined to the San Fernando Valley section of Los Angeles, 20 miles northwest of the center of the city.
It was reported the 10th freeway buckled or collapsed at Fairfax. Refrain from using the 10th freeway in either direction.
It was not just in San Fernando. 5 sections of motorways in different parts had collapsed.
I am southbound on the 5.
One man drove around with his video camera running.
And there's traffic in the southbound lanes coming at me in the number 1 lane. And there's traffic. I've just taken a hit. There's a break in the road. There's traffic coming at me in the southbound lane. I'm in shock.
In Hollywood, the quake had brought down parts of some of the older brick buildings. Power lines were ripped from their sockets throughout the whole of the Los Angeles metropolitan area, adding darkness to the confusion.
Number 6, James, please! Is there somebody in there? A kitty, just a kitty!
Fire and paramedics.
I got people stuck trapped in the stockroom. The whole shelf came down. I got 2 girls stuck right now.
All right, calm down. Give me the address.
The nature of the problem?
She's having her second heart attack. She's 80 years old and she's not breathing.
Has the baby been born yet?
No, it has not.
Only as dawn broke could the full impact of the earthquake be appreciated.
flow right through here, man.
Are you in a car?
He sounds like he's right here.
Sounds like he's right here.
Sounds like he's right
Hey, we're coming.
There were people still trapped and needing help.
I think he's right below you, Jerry.
I think he's right here. Yeah. I couldn't tell.
Underneath the masonry of a fallen multi-story car park was Salvador Pena, a street sweeper. He was alive, but pinned down by concrete. Reports of other troubles were coming in from all directions. From the San Fernando Valley, the earthquake seemed to have traveled under a range of mountains, reappearing in Santa Monica, 18 miles away to the south. The widespread nature of the damage offered few clues about the epicenter of the earthquake. Hardly a part of the metropolitan area remained untouched.
This is KNX Los Angeles.
Okay, we are getting some preliminary information here. This is a 6.5, struck at 4:31. This, according to Dr. Lucy Jones at the Caltech Seismology Lab. These are preliminary. Yeah, go ahead.
She's not sure of a location, but she thinks that it may be in San Fernando Valley.
Somewhere in the San Fernando Valley for a possible epicenter, which, of course, is POW, right in Los Angeles, in the Los Angeles city limits there.
Like everyone else, the media wanted information. They turned to the California Institute of Technology and its Earthquake Research Center, but scientists there were initially in the dark. The earthquake was so powerful that it had overloaded the computer system monitoring the scientists' ground sensors. For now, the information that would reveal the exact location of the earthquake's epicenter was unavailable to seismologists like Lucy Jones.
The waves from it came up and hit a lot of our stations at almost the same time, and it fit the pattern for microwave noise. Basically, the computer said, the ground is moving in so many places all at once. This can't be real. This must be a glitch in the microwave system, and threw it out. So when we got in there, instead of coming up with a location like we would hope to do, we often get a location within 2 minutes. Instead, we had the system saying, oh, nothing's happened. Well, yes, there was a bit of noise in the system. Nothing's happened. And we had to retrieve it.
Oh, my gosh.
No one needed sensors to feel the aftershocks.
Okay, come on back, come on back, come on.
There were dozens of mini earthquakes sending up dust storms in the mountains and valleys.
The one time we do know when an earthquake's going to happen is immediately after a big event. We know there are going to be aftershocks. Aftershocks are earthquakes. It's our one chance to get our instruments out before the earthquake happens.
The aftershocks and the resultant dust storms continued all morning. Each one provided an extra clue to where the seat of the earthquake was.
By getting the location of the aftershocks very, very exactly, we can see the details of the fault that produced the earthquakes. And we had 10 technicians in the field within 2 hours after the earthquake, because if we didn't, we'd have missed the events.
Within a few hours, the seismologists had also managed to retrieve the data initially lost by the computers. All the data pointed to the same fact. The epicenter of the earthquake had indeed been in the San Fernando Valley, directly under the community of Northridge, 23 miles northwest of Los Angeles city center. The Caltech geologist Jim Doland was among the first to fly over the epicenter to survey the scene.
The morning of the earthquake, we went up in a helicopter to try to find surface rupture, which helps us greatly in understanding which fault broke in the earthquake, which we were trying to determine the day of the earthquake. So we went up in the helicopter and spent several hours flying around the epicentral area and the area to the north, trying to find surface rupture.
Most earthquakes leave a surface gash in the Earth's crust, a superficial signal that reveals the subterranean fault that caused it. But not this time. Doland couldn't find any surface rupture caused by the Earth's movement. so there were no clues to which exact earth fault was to blame.
It's one of those unfortunate instances where we had to have an earthquake to find out where the fault that broke in the earthquake was. We didn't know that the fault that broke in the Northridge earthquake existed before the earthquake.
The widespread damage left little doubt that Northridge was indeed above the center of the earthquake. There was the evidence of a housing complex called Northridge Meadows.
Hello?
It had been 3 stories high. Now it was 2.
Wait a minute. Hold up. You underneath that? Okay, he's right underneath here.
Dozens of people were trapped inside and underneath. Of the ultimate death toll of 57 people, 16 were found inside this one building.
We were laying in bed and someone broke a window and we just managed to crawl out.
And I went to sit up to get up and I realized the ceiling was on my head.
I climbed down the balcony, I grabbed my wife, ran like heck to the center of the complex.
And I was wedged between my mattress and the wall. And the mattress was up in the air and I couldn't figure out what it was doing there, why I couldn't push it back down.
Got thrown out of bed, run downstairs, was running through glass that we didn't know was there.
There is no first floor anymore, it's gone.
I think I was in shock. And I tell you the truth, had I not been knocked unconscious, I think I might have died of a heart attack. It was that frightening.
You got a drop bag and all that?
Oh, you're welcome. Good luck. You're welcome.
Yeah, glad we could help.
You guys did that as me yesterday.
Yes.
You're welcome.
A few miles from the Northridge Meadows apartments, rescue crews were still trying to rescue Salvador Pena from the collapsed car park.
Right up here, guys, to lay him down. Yeah. Right up here.
It took 4 hours to get him out. He was badly injured, but did eventually recover.
Everyone's initially very frightened, and then once the shock starts wearing off, you really want to know what happened. It's a very schizophrenic experience, a large earthquake. It's a very schizophrenic experience for a geologist or a seismologist who works on earthquakes, because on the one hand, the amount of energy that's involved in moving a chunk of the Earth's crust 10 miles thick, moving that thing 20 feet in a couple of seconds is mind-boggling, and it's extraordinarily fascinating. That's why we work on earthquakes, because they are so fascinating. On the other hand, when you're up in a helicopter flying around over Northridge the morning of the earthquake, looking at, derailed trains, buildings on fire, apartment buildings that have collapsed and obviously killed people, on a completely different level, on a human level, it's a devastating experience. So we're constantly trying to balance these two reactions to an earthquake.
There was surface damage all over the place, but no rupture in the Earth's crust. Doland and his colleagues knew its absence meant only one thing. The earthquake was the work of a blind thrust fault. A fault that cannot be seen. It ruptures but does not break the Earth's surface. The Northridge shock started deep underground and stopped 5 miles from the surface instead of going all the way to the top. Nevertheless, that did not diminish its destructive effect.
So it was much more difficult in the day or two after the earthquake to understand what had happened, because it's very easy to go out and see a road that's offset in an earthquake. It's much more difficult to understand something that happened 10 miles deep.
The Northridge blind thrust had lasted only 6 seconds. It took the city years to recover from its effects. Unlike San Francisco to the north, Los Angeles had experienced relatively few earthquakes in its short history. There have been only a few moderate shocks, not enough to deter the city from growing into America's center of the entertainment industry. In 1933, cameras shooting a W.C. Fields feature movie caught one of the moderate shocks on film.
Man, you probably saved my life. Now what can I do for you?
Take us to Shanghai.
Shanghai?
Yeah. What's the matter?
Earthquake. Take your time, folks. Now, everybody walk easy. It's all right now. It's all right. All right. Okay. Everybody.
The shock that shook up W.C. Fields and everyone else was an earthquake centered on Long Beach, 21 miles south of the city center. It was the first recorded in Los Angeles since it had become a community of any size. It caught the city off guard. The city fathers were unaware of the need for building codes and safety measures. 115 people were killed and many buildings were destroyed. It was the first indication that Los Angeles had been sighted above an active earthquake zone. All the same, seismologists at the time played down the risk. And for the following 40 years, they seem to have been proved right. "40 years in which the city boomed and spread in all directions. New suburbs with shopping centers stretched ever outwards, especially in the area known as the San Fernando Valley."
Notice the attractive curved streets and the convenient commercial area.
The only seismic hazard people worried about, and even then they didn't worry very much, was the San Andreas Fault, which bypasses Los Angeles in the desert 60 miles away. The San Andreas Fault is really an 800-mile-long crack where two of the Earth's giant tectonic plates meet. The North American plate lies to the east under San Francisco, while the Pacific plate on the west lies beneath Los Angeles.
Los Angeles is sitting on the Pacific Ocean plate, and it's being moved to the northwest compared to North America at a rate of just under a couple of inches a year. It's about the same rate that your fingernails grow. And in 5 to 10 million years, we're going to have Los Angeles as a suburb of San Francisco, or San Francisco as a suburb of Los Angeles, depending on your point of view. And in 50 million years or so, we'll be actually heading up into Alaska, giving up on our palm trees.
The plates slide by each other in a north-south direction, but not always smoothly. The San Andreas is known as the strike-slip fault because the plates bump and grind as they rub against each other, passing in opposite directions.
It's the grinding, it's the slow, inexorable grinding of these two plates past one another that causes earthquakes. They stick in places. And when they stick, you build up strain because the plates on either side continue moving. Sticks, eventually it'll snap loose, and that's an earthquake.
It can take hundreds, sometimes even thousands of years for that strain to build up before an earthquake erupts. When it goes, it can be in one big quake. Or it is released with a series of smaller shocks. A geophysicist with the U.S. Geological Survey, Ross Stein, demonstrates what happens.
What you're looking at here is everything I know about earthquakes. And this really isn't as embarrassing an admission as it sounds, because really in this simple experiment, all of the behavior that we see in earthquakes is replicated. Now, what is the earthquake machine? It's this machine that is driven by steady motion of the plate's interiors, which is represented in this experiment by this winch, which I just crank steadily. It's got the elasticity of the Earth's crust. It's actually rubbery. It's pretty stiff, but it's rubbery. And it's got some mass that's in frictional contact with the surface. That's the fall. So by steadily loading up this system, I'm increasing the force on the brick. Okay, what just happened? We had an earthquake. Keep watching. And as the spring gets pulled in here, we're bringing up the loads again on the brick. So we've had a second earthquake. We'll let it go one more time. Okay. Now, were all these earthquakes of the same size? No, it's incredible. I can't create a situation that's any simpler than this, and undoubtedly the Earth is more complicated.
The magnitude of an earthquake is determined by the size of the area it covers and the length of its duration. This produces a sliding scale of severity. Larger quakes rated magnitude 7 or above are when the Earth relieves its strain all at once. Moderate earthquakes relieve the strain in stages but occur more frequently. There is a direct link between the San Andreas and all the faults under Los Angeles. For most of its 800-mile length, the San Andreas runs straight. Just north of Los Angeles, however, the fault takes a sudden turn. At this bend, the Pacific Plate and the North American plates no longer slide past one another, but collide head-on. Over eons, the constant banging at the bend has cracked the plate underlying Los Angeles into small pieces, creating a network of smaller faults like cracks on a pane of glass.
Because of that bend, all of the essentially broken shards of glass that makes up Southern California are being shoved up against a wall rather than just swept past it. And as they stack up against each other, these little pieces get jammed on top of each other. Some get pushed down, some get pushed up. We call that thrust faulting.
The collision of the two plates has compressed the Earth under Los Angeles as though it were being squeezed in a vise. Every so often, the compression reaches a point where one piece of Earth is forced over another. The Earth above has nowhere to go but up. The result is an earthquake. Over time, the thrust faults that produce these earthquakes have shaped California's topography.